Welcome to the panel room. Today we'll be discussing steampunk again. This will be our second panel on steampunk. But before we get started, let's go around the room like we always do and let everyone introduce themselves. So I'll go ahead and start with you, Doc.
Hi there, I'm Doc Coleman. I'm a steampunk author. Imagine that on the steampunk panel. I am the author of The Perils of Prague, which is the first of my adventures of Crackle and Bang. And I've also published a collection of steampunk short stories, The Shining Cog and other steampunk stories, and you can see the book covers behind me. So.
Perfect. Sharise.
Hi, my name is Sharise Moore. I am the author of Dr. Marvelous Jim's Odd Scholars. It's a hybrid steampunk, magical realism, alt history, YA novel.
Oh, and Tamsin.
Hi, I'm Tamsin Silver, and I'm an author with Falstaff Books. I write both historical fantasy and I write urban fantasy. My historical fantasy is what has landed me here today.
All right, perfect. So I'll start off pretty easy. Sharise, what was your first introduction to steampunk, and what got you into writing it?
I would say my first introduction to steampunk, and this is going to sound weird, but probably the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And for whatever reason, I really like the mashup of, different literary characters in that particular movie. So it wasn't necessarily an amazing movie, incredible movie, but it is something that I remembered. And I just really enjoyed seeing the way the world is viewed, or we thought the world would be viewed, the future would be viewed through the eyes of someone in another century. And I wanted to tackle that. And I also didn't see a whole lot of diversity in it either. So that was another reason why I wanted to add it to my reading selections, and also I wanted to try and write it. And then after that, I really liked the Sherlock Holmes series. I enjoyed those as well, and that probably made me want to write even more. So, yeah.
All right, Tamsin.
I hadn't even thought of Sherlock Holmes, but yeah, that would. I read those when I was younger, but I think the first book that I ever read that was in the official steampunk genre was probably this one, Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. The whole Clockwork series is fantastic. In fact, I actually like it better than that's the prequel, like the pre-trilogy, and I like that actually more than I enjoyed the original Shadowhunters books. What wanted me to write this was, now I write Western, so it's really that I went out to New Mexico and I got this idea. What happened is I went down the rabbit hole of history on the internet, and I really became infatuated with the concept of some things that we didn't understand and we didn't know about Billy the Kid and about that war that happened that no one ever teaches us in school. And so that's what kind of made me want to write in that time period. And because I love to write fantasy, I like to add a lot of magic in my stuff. So that qualifies me, I guess.
All right, Doc.
I was a small child and I saw the movie Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And that was pretty much my first introduction to steampunk, and followed it up because the local TV stations would play episodes of the Wild Wild West on Sunday afternoons, and it's like between the two of those, I just kind of fell in love with the Victorian period and the steampunk time frame. And for a long time, I loved it. And about 10 years ago when steampunk was starting to catch on, my friend T. Morris was in the process of writing his first steampunk novel with his wife, and my wife and I went to a Halloween party dressed as steampunk characters, and we just kind of had so much fun with it. And I decided that I've got my own characters here. I can make something with this. I can do something with this. So I just kind of came out of the blue and just started sitting down and writing stuff. And after a few years of revision, I felt like I had a pretty good novel. So,
All right. So Tamsin, what is the main trope that you like about steampunk, and what's one that you hate?
Yeah, go with me first. All right. I love the inventions. I love the imagination that comes into play with making things fly or making magic from from nothing. Like, it's not the typical, like when I write urban fantasy, and you've got a lot of your usual kinds of magic, but when I was working with mine, I was like, well, this is back in a different time, and I had to actually get a little more creative, and I kind of liked that idea. I also love reading when they're like, someone turns something, use clocks, and they make these robots, and I'm like, well, how'd you come up with that creepy idea? Like, I love it. I think it's really just inventive and fun. As far as tropes go, I just don't think it always has to be in England. Don't get me wrong, I am an Anglophile without question. And my next trio of Billy books takes place partially in England during Jack the Ripper. But the rest of it won't. Some of it will be in Texas, some will be in Chicago. And so the fact, and I know it's not, I know that it's become more, I guess, accepted that it's not specifically in England in this exact time, but the people who are diehards and think it has to be there, I guess that's the only thing I can think of where I'm like, really, does it have to be? But I can't think of really any other tropes. I can't think of any at the moment that really upset me about it.
All right, Doc.
let's see. Well, you'll be happy to hear, Tamsin, that Perils of Prague is not set in England. Let's see. So tropes, a trope that I love, a trope that I hate. I don't know that it's a trope, but one of the things that I love about steampunk is it was kind of the last period in history where one person studying on their own could pretty much master all the different realms of science known to man. Because after that period, there's too much knowledge out there. There's too many people pushing back the boundaries of research. So I kind of like the trope that you can have some kind of academic who is pretty much the guy that knows everything. I kind of love that. And I guess the trope that I hate is the British are the good guys. Yes,
they are.
the
British were all the bad guys.
the British were everywhere, but they were also going all over the world and doing horrible things to people. And it's like there were a lot of atrocities officially and unofficially perpetrated by the British. And honestly, in some of my books, I try to show that up. But that's the whole concept of the British being the good guys. I don't like that. Of any one group being just the good guys or just the bad guys, I hate that.
All right, Sharise.
For me, I'm with Tamsin with the inventions, but I also love the costumes. There's just something about the fashion. I actually did a cosplay photo shoot, and I cosplayed as the title character of my book. And it was so much fun to purchase all of the costumes. And, you know, I have a couple clothes, and I have some goggles, and I also added some, you know, some other things to it that, you know, gave it like an Afrocentric flair. But that's something that I love. I love Victorian fashion, and I like the fashion of steampunk. Something that I don't like, I guess going with Doc, just the lack of diversity. You know, I just would like to see different characters from different places, and just like it doesn't have to, you know, take place in England. And my book doesn't take place in England at all, not even close. You know, but you know, the people also don't have to be English. So you know, that's something that I hope the subgenre is moving away from.
All right, perfect. So my next question, and you've all kind of touched on this a little bit, is steampunk tends, really the only way I can think to describe it is historical future, because we're looking back at before we moved to, you know, the power systems we have, and take it all back to steam, but then imagine what it's like going forward from there. But because it goes back, how do you in your writing deal with, and like I said, I'll start with you, Doc, because you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'd like you to elaborate, deal with the issues of our day that weren't handled the best back then, the gender issues, racial issues.
To be totally honest, what I did is I changed history. For instance, the world that the Adventures of Crackle and Bang is set in, I refer to as the world of the Eternal Empress, because in my history, there was an accident with technology, and Queen Victoria has basically become immortal, except in my world they refer to them as Eternals. And so she has not only become a political figure that has more control over the British government, she's become a religious figure as well. And the world basically lives in fear of Britain. They're either part of Britain or they're a protectorate, which means the British have invaded, but they're basically standing there with guns watching over the local rulers with the Victoria's statement of treat your people well and keep things orderly or else. And this is kind of information that I've figured out in my head, but it's more of a backdrop that I'm putting, because it's a series, so I'm putting more information like this out in different books. But one of the things that Victoria got sick of was the fact that London was dirty, so she had them clean it up. And she's got all these clean energy technologies thing. Oh yeah, her army also has lightning rifles. So she's also very much aware of the fact that technology is dangerous. So she created the Ministry of Technological Safety, which is why, even though she's an immortal, the world is still stuck in the steam age, because these guys swoop in whenever somebody starts building a new invention and they interdict the technology. And I've played with a bunch of different things. My next book that I'm currently got in edits is The Kindred of Kali, and that is set in India. And I've rewritten the history there, where when the Indian people originally revolted and the English lord, the lords all told Victoria the only way to deal with this is just to put it down. And in my world, Victoria said, no, those are my subjects too. And so instead of, they put it down they suppressed the rebellion with more gentle means, but then she pulled up all of the previously deposed Indian nobility and said, look, I'm going to turn the country back over to you, but you're part of my empire now. And we're going to cement this deal. And she married off one of her grandchildren to the son of the head Raja over in India. I've got the names, but they escape me right now. And that changed everything there, because instead of the English and the British always being at loggerheads, now it was a case of, okay, the British will let you move up in class, the Indians won't, but we've got an official statement that it's okay for the Indians to marry the British and the British to marry the Indians. So weird Western Indian amalgamation going on there. And I'm looking forward to people being able to read about it. And I've gone on too long, so go to something.
Well, I wanted to do a follow-up. Did you do that to help with the story, or did doing that improve and change your story?
I did that to make a lot of people upset. By changing the way that history went, I created the Eternal Empress as a figure of unimaginable power, who's very ruthless about staying there. The populace likes her because she keeps things peaceful, and life is pretty easy for them. But people with ambition hate her because she's in the way of everything they're trying to do. So I've created a world where everything looks nice, but there's tons of conflict under the surface. So I can come up with all kinds of stories left, right, and center.
All right. Sharise.
For me, I dug into history. I've always been obsessed with that 100-year period between the end of slavery in the United States and the Civil Rights Movement, because it's just an amazing time period, and we almost never learn about it at all. It's like, okay, there's no more slaves, and then boom, Martin Luther King. And that's absolutely not the way history happened. So what I did was I actually just dug deep, and I looked for Black American scientists and inventors and magicians, and I used them as inspiration in my book. So one of the main characters, her name is Brenda Banneker. She's a descendant. She's the great niece of Benjamin Banneker. And he leaves her this briefcase of just thingamajigs, and inventions. And the inventions have this steampunk quality, and also a magical quality that she's not, she really doesn't know what to do with. And then I also stumbled upon this Black magician named Black Hermit, and he was huge during the early 1900s. And he was also like a follower of Marcus Garvey, go figure. This is in the 1900s. And then I also stumbled upon these like colored amusement parks during Jim Crow, just things that I'd never heard of. So the book largely takes place at the Motherland amusement park, and it's the creation of Dr. Marvelous Jen. And basically what she's done is, since she knows most people don't have the ability to travel to Africa, she wants to bring Africa to them. And so many of these weird and wild, exhibits and rides are steampunk in nature, and they're also very futuristic in nature, because she's a time thief. So what I've done is I've just borrowed a lot from history, and I was just amazed at the nuggets that I found, the things I didn't even know, at all. And just knowing that these parks existed because of Jim Crow, Jim Crow laws and because of segregation, really just made me so excited. I really couldn't stop, researching. I really went down a rabbit hole, while creating this book. But it was a lot of fun to just borrow from history and to pretty much put a steampunk twist on what I wrote.
All right, perfect.
Cool.
Yeah, Tamsin.
So you were asking specifically how we're dealing with race in our books, yes?
Race or gender,
Gender
the
bodies.
issues of today that were less than stellar back then.
So if anyone reads any of my books, I tend to have a through line on a lot of them because I have a serious soapbox issue with equality. And so all of my books touch on it somewhere. When you're writing in the 1800s, you are, and thankfully I'm writing after slavery has ended, but you're stepping on a lot of other issues, right? And it's difficult because I made the decision early on that I wanted my history to be my history. And that, because let's make it as difficult for myself as I can. And so I wanted the history. I didn't change much. So when you read The Curseability of the Kid and the rest of the series, the history from the 1870s and the history from the 1949 section, that's pretty much spot on, other than obviously some of the conversations, but like things that happen, other than 3 deaths that don't actually happen in mine, I keep it exactly as possible. By doing that, though, I do have to deal with the fact there was a lot of racism. And for me, it's important that I find a happy medium for that. I don't want to ignore it, not in any way, shape, or form. But I also don't want to like saturate the book. I don't want to be a Bible thumper with it, right? So Billy the Kid was very much entrenched in the Mexican lifestyle. Like he was very much, he spoke multiple languages, and Spanish was one of them, and he was very much into that culture, and he was very much part of a lot of different cultures. And so I do address the situation a couple times when people say things that are racist, and he deals with it. In the next trio of books, I'm going to be in Texas. And like so I've been reading this book. It is, oh God, Jason, the racism in just the book, that's the story about what happened about this murder, these multiple murders of these servant women. I keep cursing out loud and yelling and writing nasty things in there about what they're saying about African-American people. But because it's so prevalent down there, obviously I'm going to have to deal with it. And I have a very prominent African-American character in the next series, and he's going to be going to Texas. So I won't have a choice. I'm going to have to make sure that we deal with it and make sure we bring to light how horrible it was. And so that people see, because to me, it's important. I think ignorance is part of the problem. And so I want to make sure that I address it, but I'm telling you, as someone who's still very much someone who writes about this book is just, it's flooring me what people used to believe. And so to the point where I've had to put the book down a couple times and I can't read this, right? I can't. So it's something I'm going to have to address. And I just have to, I work with Melissa, who's my editor, just to really find a happy medium where I don't get too heavy handed and yet I address the situation. And that's the longest answer ever. I am sorry.
So my next question, we'll try to lighten it up a little bit. The craft of writing, especially steampunk. How do you write, and I'll start with you, Sharise, so that it is steampunk and not just a story that someone is throwing some gears into?
That's a tough question. I do have a favorite collection, and it's a steampunk anthology. Steampunk was a term, and I think I'm giving the right person credit, and it was termed by Maurice Broders. I think it was Maurice. If it wasn't Maurice, please don't. Nobody's tar and feather me, but he came up with that term as a way of including, Black people in the steampunk world. But I own a steampunk anthology that I often go back to be quite honest, and I try to look at the way in which these particular authors handle their stories. I have no problem at all letting people know that I'm inspired by other authors. I have no problem at all. Just, just looking at what they've done and looking at the way that they write and really studying the way that they've crafted the magic in their stories and the inventions in their stories and keeping that in mind as I write. So one of the ways that I deal with it is, honestly, I try to hold my work up against some of my favorite stories, short stories and novels, and that has helped. That's really helped.
Okay.
I don't know if that was a good answer or not.
That's good. Tamsin.
Repeat the question.
What do you do as a writer to give the feel of steampunk without, I guess just paying lip service to the genre?
Well, mine are a little different, right? So mine is Weird West, not Victorian. I mean, though it's stepping on the Victorian era. I think one of the things I do is that I try to take and I like to be really inventive. Like, remember I said one of the things I love about steampunk is that they invent different ways of doing their magic and creating things. And so I like to think about that. I did a lot of research on weaponry for the time period. And I did, and a lot on the clothing, like when I'm describing a lot of some of the women's clothes. But for me, I mean, there really wasn't anything I consciously chose in order not to be cookie cutter, because I'm already doing, I'm writing Billy the Kid and werewolves. I mean, like, it doesn't get much different. We were joking around trying to come up with a tagline for me when I'm selling stuff. And I finally just laughed and said, yeah, if Young Guns got the history right, he added werewolves in for good measure. And I was just joking, and they go, yeah, that works. So I was like, I was just making fun. but really, I can't get much more weird. So I don't think I had to worry too much about it, but I made sure I did not use any gears on anything. So that's probably the one thing I did consciously do.
All right. Doc?
Let's see. Technically, what I write is steampunk comedy adventure. So part of it is there's always action going on. There's always some kind of gadget, whether or not it gets you anywhere or not. There's always some kind of gadget. And I've got three main characters. I've got Professor Harmonious Crackle. Exactly.
Oh, great.
His colleague Titania Bang, which is why it's the Adventures of Crackle and Bang. And then I've got the narrator who never actually comes out and tells you what his name is. And it's told first person from this narrator's point of view. And it's always a case of he doesn't understand what's going on. He asks a question to the professor. Miss Bang answers. The professor interrupts. There's this wonderful three-person banter going on that I like to think that I both convey that polite English sensibility, and the fact that, you know, buildings are falling down around them, the city's on fire, and we've got to hurry before something blows up again. Let's see. It's a juggling act. You've got to keep all these things in motion. And it's one of those things I can tell when a scene is going right because I do that, and it's effortless. And I know when I'm struggling a bit with the scene, because it's like, okay, I'm focusing too much on this. Something's too serious. We need a joke. We need an explanation. We need to look at the guts of a machine and not understand how the damn thing works. So I don't know. It's actually one of the tropes that I do want to attack someday is the whole bit about people just having spare parts tacked on, having, you know, just gears stuck on things. And I intend to turn that one on its head by actually having those things be useful, because the machine that they're working with falls apart so much they need those spare parts to do quick repairs. But it's like so far everything that I've had that's mechanical in nature has been functional. So there's none of this trappings with gears glued on it yet.
All right. So Tamsin, why do you think steampunk lends itself to having its own subculture, stepping away from the writing portion of it to the people that dress up? And some of them more than dress up, they live it seems.
Yeah. You met, Leona Renee Hyber. She completely embodies that 24/7. I think that it's something that invokes such great imagination with costume. As someone with a theater background, and I think that the clothing of the era, and then you add in all the steampunk stuff like the goggles and the gears, and you add in the magic, but let's be honest, some of the clothes back then, though it's not something you would want to wear every day, because bustles and corsets and tight shoes and multi-layers and canes, it gets to be a bit much. But I think that for dressing up and for going to conventions, I think it just lends itself to the idea of really being able to dress the character that you love in a book. And it's something that's possible to dress up in, no matter your size or your sexual orientation or what you look like, anything. Like, I think it just really is a wonderfully open chance for people to cosplay and have fun with it. And no one will ever judge, and no one ever judges it. Like, they're like, oh, cool, you turned that into a steampunk character, and all of a sudden it's just cool. Second season of The Masked Singer, the person who won, I won't tell you who, he was dressed as a fox, but he'd done himself as a steampunk looking fox, and it was so kick-ass. And I just think that it's something that people play with well in costumes, and it just lends it to everyone. And I think it's inclusive in that way. And I think that's one of the reasons why you see a lot of people gravitate to that, dressing up for that stuff at conventions.
All right. Doc?
Part of it is the Victorian era is one of those eras where it's like just about everybody looked fabulous. Even the beggars looked good because they were wearing rich people's cast-offs. You know, when you've got the poor man begging and he's got a frayed top hat. Yeah, there's just something about, I don't know. Yes, there were a lot of layers because guess what? Hey, England and many parts of Europe were cold, and they didn't have central heating back then, so you actually enjoyed the layers. And that was also the big textile, the big textile boom because of the beginnings of industrialization. So you had all these wonderful fabrics that everybody wanted to play with. It was honestly, look at the vest and the coat and the cover. It's like it was the last time. Really, it was the last time people could feel good about looking good. And as Tamsin said, it didn't matter what your body shape and size was. You could dress well. A few years ago at Balticon, I was on a panel that was called Just Dandy. And I subtitled it the importance of accessories in steampunk. Because that's the other fun thing is, all you need is a few basic pieces of clothing, a corset and a gown for a woman, a vest and a jacket and for a man, and put that with any suit and trousers, and then accessorize it, and it's steampunk. And there's just so much fun, and it's so appealing for people to build their own accessories. I mean, we're all approaching this from a literary perspective, but steampunk is very much a maker's genre, because it's so much about the makers and about the musicians who show up, who play music in these outlandish outfits. And we're over there in the corner waving our books and say, we're inspiration. But we're still there, and it wouldn't be there without us. But we're not center stage.
All right. Sharise, you mentioned fashion earlier. So what are your thoughts?
Yes, I don't know. I guess you can't call it nostalgia since none of us were alive then. So it's not exactly nostalgia, but it is almost this. I don't know. It's this idea of living in a time that was so unbelievably sophisticated. There's something about steampunk that is truly sophisticated. And I have friends, there's this steampunk piece that I really want to buy. And I've been putting it off because it really can't be a priority, because I have bills. So it can't really be a priority, but it's like a silver chain, and it's like a steampunk seahorse. And I was showing it to a friend of mine, and she was talking about how much she loved it. And she really doesn't even know what steampunk is. She has my book now, so she's kind of sort of understands, but it's not really her thing. Steampunk just has a broad appeal because of its inventiveness, and because it has this great grasp on the past, a past that I think that many people are curious about, exactly, and may want to live, during, who knows, depending upon who you talk to, and just the intricacies. It's of all the subgenres, it's the most tangible for me anyway. But I think of fantasy and I think of sci-fi. I just think of something that's so far out, that I'm of course I love looking at Star Wars. I love looking at and reading N.K. Jemisin and some of the other stories. But that's not exactly tangible. Whereas something from the past, something that's actually happened, something that's rooted in history, I think that, I don't know, people feel drawn to it. Like, I found a picture, well, I didn't find it. My great aunt turned 100 in February. And so she had this picture that she gave the family. Unfortunately, she passed away a month and a half after her birthday. But she had this picture of our ancestors, and the picture was from 1892. And I was just amazed at it because they were all dressed in this Victorian like costume, and so just looking at the picture, we were trying to figure some different things out about our ancestors. Like, okay, so these people look like they may have owned the business. You know, these people look like they may have, you know, done this or done that, because, you know, we're still trying to pick through our history and our family tree to try to find more things out about our ancestors. But that could have easily been like a steampunk picture. So I think it's just the past. There's something about the past being rooted, something that we can all grasp and kind of hold on to and point to, that makes steampunk attractive.
All right. And I think this will probably be my last question. So Doc, for new writers out there, what are some suggestions, tips, tricks for someone that wants to take up steampunk?
My favorite suggestion for new writers is don't worry about it, just sit down and start writing it. And remember that the purpose of the first draft is to suck. So we will fix it all in post. Don't worry about it while you're writing it. Just get from beginning to end. Now, in terms of figuring out steampunk, it's always a case of know who your characters are, know why the world is like this. Everything else will come from that. I started with who my main characters were. I figured out what their damages and their foibles and their skills were, and then I figured out what kind of world produced them, and then I threw in things that were fun.
All right, Sharise?
I always tell my students to have as much fun as possible, and but I also think it's a great opportunity to just read more history and read more, you know, from the time period, and not necessarily the literature, but as Tamsin was saying, the actual history. You know, I didn't know any of that about Billy the Kid, and now you make me want to go look up more about Billy the Kid. You know, there's so many things that we don't learn in school. You know, I think steampunk is an amazing opportunity to brush up on your history and use history as a tool. I definitely use it as like a launching pad. You know, again, I found out some things about historical figures that I never knew, you know, just from the research and writing the book, and that made it all the more sweet, made it even more fun, you know. So again, as Doc said, you know, you have to just write because we can't edit a blank page. So you have to just write, but have fun with it and use history as a pillar for your writing.
All right. And finally, Tamsin.
Read as much as you can. Find a couple authors in that genre. I sound like John Hartness. Read it. So yeah, read steampunk, and the other thing I agree with Sharise. Do the research. You know, look into that history. If you're going to write in a time period, do a little research. Find out some people. Look up. There's nothing cooler than heading over to Pinterest and looking up time. Like there's tons of pictures of the clothing and all this stuff, and just feel free to let your imagination just fly, because nothing's really gonna be wrong. So just the idea I would say is read some, get ideas, do some research, then just sit down and have a good time and write what you want.
All right.
Wikipedia has some lovely pages on fashion by the decade for about 100 years of European fashions. And the fun part about Wikipedia is it's all sourced, so you can go to the original sources and look at it too.
Oh yeah.
And I second the whole Pinterest thing. I do character boards all the time, you know, and just one entire board just on characters and just on costuming, just on setting, just on, you know, airships, you know, and gadgetry and potions. So use Pinterest. It's a great visual tool.
All right, perfect. So before we go, let's go back around, let everyone know where they can find you. And I'll start with you, Sharise.
You can find me on Twitter at Sharise_B. That's SHARISE_B. My Instagram is b.sharise, b.sharise. And my website is bsharisemore.com.
All right, Tamsin.
I keep it really simple. See this name right here in the corner? Just go to Google, type my name. TamsinSilver.com is where you'll find most everything. On Facebook, I'm Tamsin Silver. On Twitter, I'm Tamsin Silver. On Instagram, I'm just Tamsin Silver, pretty much everywhere. If you really want to have a good time and you want to know more about Billy the Kid, if you are on Facebook and you type in the words Billy the Kid Rides Again, you will find the fan page I have for the book, for The Curse of Billy the Kid. And you can follow along with a lot of the history on it there.
All right, and Doc.
I'm also easy to find. Just go to your favorite search engine and search on Doc Coleman Steampunk, and you will find me. You'll find me using that on Amazon. You'll find a cat on my chest.
I was like, finally.
You will find
disappearing.
Yeah, the disappearing cat head. You'll find my website. I'm Doc Coleman on Facebook. On Twitter, the handle is at Scalesley, Scales LEA. But you could probably find it by searching for Doc Coleman, because the name, I changed the name to Doc Coleman Steampunk Author. So got to get that branding out there.
All right. I want to thank all of you and thank everyone for watching. We'll see you next time.
All right.
Bye.